We're in the Maimer Ivdus Hashem B'Simcha, page 119 in the Sfarim that using my Morim Elukotim of the previous Rebbe, Chelik Gimel, volume 3, page 119. To recap briefly, at this point the Rebbe is speaking about the virtue of Tainug, pleasure and delight, over anything else. And he says that Tainug is so powerful that it will overpower other feelings, intellectual feelings and understanding. In other words, if you have a deep idea or you have an idea and you're going to be governed by the idea, yet if Tainug kicks in some other idea where you actually get pleasure from the other idea, you will go with that idea versus this idea. Even though maybe you understand better the first idea. But the power of Tainug, as it says elsewhere in Chassidus, about Ratzon, about will, it shatters, it smashes, it overtakes. Tainug does the same thing, but without shvira, without breaking. It becomes so delicious to you and so pleasurable to you that you put everything else to the side, even though intellectually doesn't make no sense. Then the Rebbe, once he established that rule, that Tainug is deeper within the soul, within the person, than any other part of the person, he then speaks about the differences between various pleasures. And he compares the pleasure of seeing, Re'iyah, to the pleasure of understanding. Something called Riyas Ein Seichel, the mind's eye. And in the mind's eye, as much as it's powerful, but when you experience something that you actually see with your eyes, it's the most powerful. And without elaborating on this now, the Rebbe in the last Maimer that he distributed before he had his stroke, which is by Chabad considered the last will and testament, and every yahrzeit that Maimer is learned by Hasidim called, it begins with the words V'ata Tetzaveh, because it was on Parshas, it was around that time in Purim Katan. It's based on a Maimer, the previous Rebbe of Purim Katan. And in that Maimer he speaks about how deeply the soul, the nefesh, is rooted, and how deep man is rooted in the nefesh. And he brings this idea, the difference between seeing something and perceiving something. So although we say that understanding something leads a person to the highest of heights, nevertheless, seeing something is even higher. And the proof is, I remind you, with Aristotle, one of the proofs, where Aristotle was the epitome of intelligence, of human intelligence, and when they found him in an uncompromising situation where he did something very embarrassing and disgusting, they asked him, how could you have done this? This defies the dictates of seichel, of logic, of intellect. And what did Aristotle answer? At that time, when I did this shameful act, I wasn't Aristotle. I was an animal. So generally speaking, I'm Aristotle. But when I goof up, or when I act like a behemoth, I'm not Aristotle. Now the truth is, we're all that way. We don't have to creep to Aristotle. The reason why I'm bringing Aristotle is because he was the epitome of human intelligence. That's what they say. So how can it be, Yoini, that human intelligence should allow a person like Aristotle to act with such indecency and disgust? And the answer is because what he saw with his eyes were more tasty for him, were more pleasurable for him. So the koyach hatainug, you hear this? The sense of pleasure that Aristotle got from what he saw and therefore acted upon was greater than all of his understanding. And that's the pshat in the story. I don't think I've ever explained it this way, but now, as we're learning, it entered my cup. I hope I'm right. I've said the story many times and shared it with you as well, and this pshat never entered my mind, based on what we're learning here in the Maimer. Mm-hmm. No, don't you think it's a solid explanation? Yeah. So so this is again an example. When you learn Chassidus, you have to materialize it. So how are we materializing this, Moshe? That the koyach hatainug of Aristotle was seichel. Professor so-and-so at Evanston or at Northwestern or wherever, Columbia, wherever you go, University of Berlin, you learn from this professor and that professor and this, with all the titles and all the acronyms. And then you find out that Einstein was a womanizer. You say, Mr. Einstein, you? And the answer is that his koyach hatainug, where his real pleasure and delight was more in women than in the theory of relativity. That's the answer. Otherwise, if the koyach haseichel would be stronger, it would outdo the koyach hatainug, the pleasure that he had from women. And this nakuda is a very important nakuda, Avram, in how we look at life and how we look at ourselves and how every day it's an avodah. Someone, we've discussed this too. This person is holy, that person's holy. In Chabad, you should know it's a general rule. We don't think of many people really, really holy. That whole idea is in the Chabad paradigm, in the Chabad mindset. In true Chabad, it's a non sequitur. Why? Because you don't know a person who the person really is till push comes to shove, till they're tested, and that's why the great Hasidim, like Rabbi Avram Mayor, and I've said this before and I repeat it, who told me many times, when they said this chassid and that chassid, he's talking about now in Chabad Chassidim, he asked me a question. That this one is great, that one's great. And he said, did they allow themselves to be shechted? And I looked at him, what? He says, were they ready to allow to spread Yiddishkeit during the time of the communists and Stalin, even if it meant they're shooting him the next day and they're sending him away to Siberia and never be sent again? And if they weren't ready to do that, they're nothing. They're nothing. Why? Because according to what we're learning in the Maimer here, the koyach hatainug is not God. The koyach hatainug is self. And this is a very, very radical statement. But we're learning Chassidus, and we're thinking people, and if you think about this, I'm not saying this to put anyone down, Chas v'sholom. Rabbi Avram he was just saying this to wake himself up, and for me to wake myself up and say, this whole idea that he's this and he's the it's such a bluff. Because if you're not ready to give over your koyach hatainug to the Eibishter, then it's all an intellectual endeavor. And we say it in davening, Cheved. I want you to listen to this and pay attention every day when you daven. Lokeil baruch ni'imis yiteinu. Every morning, to Hashem, Lokeil baruch ni'imis, blessings of sweetness, yiteinu, we give ourselves over. Right? So there was a famous chassid he interpreted this verse when he davened in the morning. This is in the Birchas Yotzer, before the second bracha, after Kodesh, Baruch, right, Kodesh, and the next paragraph it says this. Is it on Shabbos only or during the week? Or the week also? I don't remember. Look at this. Anyway, so he says there, Lukeil Baruch Ne'imis Yiteinu. Whatever is your most ne'imot, whatever in Yiddish, whatever is most geschmack to you, whatever is your pleasure, whatever you consider your greatest pleasure, Yiteinu, give it over, Lokeil, to God. It's a beautiful interpretation. Lokeil, so in other words, the literal pshat is, you begin with God, you go further. the taich of this is Baruch Le'imois, the blessed sweetness, whatever you consider blessed and sweet in your life, Yiteinu, give that over to the first word, Lokel, to Hashem. No, I'm asking you, if we think about these 4 words, do you think we're going to come to an easy conclusion about ourselves, about others, that they're plugged in? And the answer is not chas v'shalom to belittle anyone. The answer is to Avram to look and understand that there's so much more to do, and that a person who is an Oved Hashem should come to a point where Lokel Baruch Im Yiteinu. What is the Alter Rebbe saying, chapter 8 of Tanya, quoting Rebbe, right? That he never was nene, he never had hana, he never had benefit, he never had pleasure, hana'ah, pleasure, mi'olam hazeh. Not that he didn't walk in the streets of Paris, and not that he didn't go to a beautiful museum at the Gan Chayot in Yerushalayim, and not that he didn't go for a nature walk in New Mexico Reserve. He did all of that. The question is, where is his tainuk? In other words, he's walking on the walk and talking the talk, but what's really in his heart is Hashem, God. I remember, I must have been 13 or 14, it was I think 1974, 75. It was the first time that Mordechai ben David, Yoina, you're going to appreciate this. Mordechai ben David was the first, after Reb Shlomo Carlebach, like no one came to his footsteps in Yiddish kosher music, but nevertheless, Mordechai ben David took he went, he had a very different style than Shlomo Carlebach, and he identified with the young frum people. Okay, Reb Shlomo was very much identifiable to the 60s and 70s seekers, and that whole. The fact is that the whole frum world loves his music today and sings his music, etc. In the biggest Satmar Shul in Monroe, right? They're singing Shlomo Carlebach's music. That's not the point. But I'm saying at that time, in the 70s, it wasn't yet popular. The first one who popularized Hasidic music, in a sense, in this, way, in the style that Avram Fried and today's singers was Mordechai ben David. Mordechai ben David. He had a concert at Brooklyn College. I believe it was Chalamoid Pesach or Chalamoid Sukkot. It was definitely Chalamoid. That's my recollection. I don't remember which one. My mother, Alea Sholem, she really, my father worked very hard, was working always, so Chalamoid was a time when, she would kind of press on him and force him to take us on trips. So once we went to Philadelphia to Liberty Bell, and once we went to Washington to Smithsonian, once we went to visit relatives in Montreal, these were trips that we did as a family during Chalamoid. Similar to, I'm sure, what you all do in Eretz Yisrael when you have an odd chance. But she really, she made it like, we're doing this. Don't tell me work. We are doing this. So one of these times, there was it was the first large concert that Mordechai ben David was singing at and presenting at Brooklyn College. And this, in our communities in Flatbush and Borough Park, out here, this was the talk of the town. And she made my father buy tickets. And we have 4 siblings, she's taking her kids, we're all going to the concert. It's kosher, it's Hasidic music or frum music, and I don't remember, I don't think there was separate seating. I don't remember. And we went to the concert. On the way out, and I'm saying this not with gaiva, I'm just telling you what happened, because it's etched in my memory from 1975, that's nearly 50 years ago, 45 years ago. Anyway, so I turned to my father, And I was a bacher that, enjoyed learning, but I enjoyed listening to the New York Mets, sports, but I was a good student. So, and I turned to my father and I said, it was a nice concert, but I would have rather have been home, doing my homework, learning. I remember I didn't have that pleasure that, everyone had. And I have a lot more to say about that concert, but it's not for now, because it wasn't the same Mordechai ben David that we know today, who is a Hasidic Jew, a real Hasidic Jew. If you saw him in those days and you saw who he was singing to in the first two rows, you would close your eyes and you would go elsewhere. It was a very trying time for Orthodox youth, for Hasidic youth. It was a very trying time. The 60s really made an impact on everybody, including our communities. I have memories of the Catskills. Woodburn, it was called Woodburn. And I remember my mother, Shalmosa, would, after Shabbos, she would want us to go out for pizza sometimes, and sometimes in the back of the pizza store, they might still have it. They had a pool. They were shooting pool. But it was much more than pool. It was really a place where a frum boy shouldn't be at. So it was a very, very challenging time. So Mordechai, at that time, was in a way caught in that realm. But he used his music to channel it somehow. The point I'm making, getting back to what we're learning, what's the point I'm making? That the koyach hatainug is where the person is at. That's the barometer. If you want to know where a person's at, you don't look at what he does, and you don't look at what he preaches, and you don't look about what he understands, and you don't even look about what he feels. You need to look at his tainug. Where is his pleasure? And wherever his pleasure is, that's who he is. And in a way, it's a simple script. That's the way to see if someone is really emes, holy, good, and plugged in. If not, they might do great things, but they're not. There's a famous saying of Lubavitch Chassidim would say in Russian, and now he's off now. Pan to pandi something. In other words, a servant I am, but not yours. There's a Russian saying, I am a servant, but not yours. Oh, that's the question. Whose servant am I? So Avraham Ayar says, whose servant am I? When you're ready to let yourself be shechted for Yiddishkeit, you are God's servant. Because you're only doing it because of Hashem. You're not getting no self-aggrandizement, and you have not getting no honors, and you're not making any money. It's all for the Eibishter. Let's continue. So this is what we're talking about now. 119, the beginning of the new paragraph. Yes. Yes.
Sorry, forgive me. I think we stopped actually on 117 at towards the bottom of the page, the 4 lines from the top where it says Ve'eno Dome. I think that's where we stopped.
I thought so too. I was surprised that we were.
Okay. So I just we'll go back. If you tell me that, I have a private chavrusa that I learned a mimer with, and I know I went up to here, so I guess I didn't teach that to you yet. So let's go. Thank you very much, Moshe. Appreciate it. 117.
Yeah, perfect.
4 lines from the bottom. Ve'ena doime. Ve'ena doime la'achayes shebeivorim shenimshach mahus hachayes. In this previous paragraph, he explained to us that chayes, vitality, comes from the essence of a person's neshama. Says the Rebbe, there's no comparison between the chayes in the organs of a person compared to the chayes in a person's behavior. And he says, although this is a rhetorical remark, although the whole idea of chayes, that the soul, it animates the body, it's only an emanation of the soul. We've learned this many times. Avram, how much of the soul is in the body? The answer is, it's a ha'orah, it's an emanation of the soul. The etzem haneshama, the essence, is not manifest daily. So the Rebbe's question is, the ein ha-nefesh, misasekes lahachis is a guf. And the proof is, Yonason, that the soul doesn't have to work extra overtime to enliven the body. As soon as the soul goes into the body gets animated, right? What does that show? That shows that it's not the essence, because when the essence is involved in something, it takes a lot of work. And the fact that we got up this morning and we said Maidani, the neshama went in, what work did it take? It was like automatic. The body's alive. Yes, we say it's a miracle that the soul can do that, but the fact is, it's not an ASIC, right? ASIC means not just business, but involvement in business, hard work. He brings another example. Fire doesn't have to work overtime to warm up something that's placed next to it. I did teach you this, I remember now, but anyway, it's fine. I told you that in Chicago, in New York, and in Baltimore, it's cold in the winter. And the heaters and the steam is on, the radiators. And you go and you sit down there. Did the radiator think and know before you're going to sit there, and did it have to warm itself up any special way to warm you up? No. Automatically, when you put on the thermostat and the radiator, it rises and it becomes hot, and you happen to sit down, you're going to be impacted. It's b'derech memela. I remember Yaakov even said the word b'derech memela. Oh no, Yonason. I remember Yonason said the word b'derech memela. Anyway, it's fine. The chlolos in Yenachayos uraka oros hanefesh. So what we see from this is that when we talk of chayas, animation of the soul to the body, it's only ha'ora, a reflection, right? A reflection. Mikol Mokim, this is the retort to his question, Hare Mehus, top of 118, ha'ora nimshechas gam be'ivonim chitzenim b'yad v'regel. We see that the essence of this reflection, of this emanation, is found within the external organs of the hand and the feet. Especially if you talk about the organs of the rei of the lev, the lungs and the heart, surely there we see there's life force, because they're so sensitive. The chosh came b'midah, even more so, needless to say, in emotions of the heart, she'em ruchnim harbe yoser, they're much more spiritual, mikol achayes shebevorim, more than any of the organs, including the mind and including the heart and including the lungs, the emotions. V'cholshkein, and even more so, Eira Seichel, the light, the energy of intellect, the intellect, that's the most sensitive and spiritual, more than all of the above, the Cholza Mohus Eir V'chayis HaNefesh. Why is that? Because you're right, the Rebbe is saying like this, you're right. The essence of the soul is not in the body, but nevertheless, in that reflection that is in the body, it's full force, it's there. The senses, whatever the senses are, smelling, touching, seeing, over there, it's more external. Yes, Moshe.
Yeah, I just got a question. This is sort of maybe the first time I can remember hearing the concept that the neshama, essence of the neshama, is not in the goof. Like it's only the ha'ara, like the emanation. So my question is, where if the neshama is not in the goof, where is it?
So it again, in classical Kabbalah Chassidus, the answer to that is, it's in the heavenly source that's your source. Every person has what we call shoresh haneshama. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, it doesn't mean climb up like this Star Trek guy, whatever his name is. He decided to go up to the moon for 10 minutes, and all of a sudden he saw Martians. Okay? He got the thrill. He's been doing Star Trek, make billions of dollars, so he got the thrill at 90 years old. Hashem allowed him to live till 90 to go into the space. Okay, he had a taiva. He was Mekayim his taiva. What I'm saying is, Moshe, the source of our neshama is not in this level, or in this star and in this. It's a spiritual concept. Every one of us has a spiritual connection to Hashem. That spiritual connection we call the source of the neshama, shoresh haneshama. When we tap into what?
But is that connected to in the Tanya when the Alter Rebbe talks about
the chords? The chords.
The chord, yeah.
Yes. That's exactly. I was thinking the same thing. And those chords, right? It's like a rope. Chevel nachlosa. It's like a rope. You know, they have to be thick, and every avera makes it a little less and less till it's very thin. Chas v'sholem, and that's the idea of chorus. I don't want to go into it, but that's what it says in Tanya. Very good. So that's the Sheiresh HaNeshama. So when Chassidus says, like we're learning here, and I'm glad you asked and I pointed it out, that it's only a ha'ora, a reflection, an emanation of the soul that animates the body, we mean an active mode. The active mode now is Shorish HaNeshama. However, when a person does an act of Mesiras Nefesh, this is basic Yiddishkeit, just the way Chassidus, explains it. When a person does an act of Mesiras Nefesh, of self-sacrifice, they reveal their source as they are in their body, and they have what we call an Etzem Neshama experience. See, to understand this, you have to, first and foremost, you have to go into the world of spirituality and non-tangibility. Here with many of the Hasidim here who never learned Hasidus, and they can have the kapota and the payas and the shtraimel and everything. And Rabbi Yoel Khan would teach Chassidus in the good old days. They say he once spoke about Atzilus and Bria, the worlds, and someone raises his hand and says, "Where can I find that?" And it caused people to laugh inside. Like, what do you mean? Where can you find it? Not in Kugel and not in Chont. You can't find. Where can I find it? Which direction? My GPS. Do I go towards the turnpike or do I go on the 19 if I'm going to Newark Airport? Where can I find it?
BQE.
Oh, the BQE. Where can I find it? Yeah, the BQE goes to Williamsburg, right? Where can I find it?
770.
Okay. The point is, whatever your source is, for you it's 770, for someone else it's Williamsburg, for a third person it's here or there, whatever. That's the Nakuda. It's a mindset. But at the same time, you need to be plugged in to your Shaidish. If you go to someone else's Shaidish, it's not really going to help you. And that's what a tzaddik, one second, that's what a tzaddik does. A tzaddik helps you realize what your Shaidish is. But you have to do it. Yes, Moshe, what do you want to say?
So just on that note, then, when a person asks, where can I find it, just like what you were talking about, that's why I guess somebody, let's say, if someone would take a trip to the Ukraine, and he would go to different kvarim of Rebbeim, and let's say he would find himself at a particular one, let's just say, for sake of discussion, the Alter Rebbe.
Okay.
Okay. I was just going to say.
And he really, really feels that he's connecting. He really feels something. And maybe other places, maybe other olim, other Rebbeim, maybe not. Would that give credence, rise that the shorsh of his neshama is connected to the same or similar shorsh of the Alter Rebbe, or maybe that
it's an indicator. It's an indicator. But the mistake shouldn't be made that I must be standing in Hadich to have that feeling, because then again you're not being real. Hadich is the platform that brings it out because of the awesomeness, the area, the people. The whole idea of connecting to Sheidish. One second, Hillel. The Sheidish HaNeshama is inner, from inner out, not from outer in. But yes, that is an indicator. I'm not going to conclude that has to be, but that's an indicator. Yes, Hillel.
I just want to say that it seems something that seems to indicate this concept. You see often in Hasidic stories, Hasidim or someone would go to a particular Rebbe who would then send them to another Rebbe for their Yeshua, because that's where the shorish of their neshama was connected to them.
Yes, there are such stories. That's a very good point too. Absolutely. And again, a tzaddik, we believe, could kind of see and know what your shorish neshama is, and that's the whole idea. This is a fundamental teaching in Yiddishkeit b'chalal, in Hasidus in particular, that I would say, I'm not sure if the Litvish Mahalach, the Musar Mahalach would accept. In other words, and I have to clarify that, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the founder of the Musar movement, was a big tzaddik, was a tremendous yid, right? Would he? We don't find. Again, I'm not a bucky in all of his writings, but I don't believe we find this type of language in the Bali Musar. I mean, Yaakov, you seem to have an understanding of a knowledge of Musar. Would you say what I just said is correct or not?
Finding the Shorish Neshama would Rabbi Yisrael direct you?
No, that idea, that whole messer, that whole approach, do you find that in the writings of Musar?
Offhand, I can't identify.
Okay, so if you can't offhand say Chad Shtayim Shalosh, then even if it does exist, it's not the common language. Yes, Hillel.
I just wanted to mention that a couple of weeks ago I saw on the shelf of Shul here a fascinating new sefer written in English called Nefesh HaTzimtzum, which is written by somebody from Ramat Beit Shemesh, which is it looks like a very extensive effort to kind of reconcile the Sefer Nefesh HaChaim with the Sefer HaTanya.
Really?
With extraordinary haskamos, including my cousin, the Talmud Rebbe, I've never seen give a haskama to a sefer. Rabbi Yisrael Meir Morgenstern and other really impressive people.
Thank you.
So just a fascinating kind of moment.
Yeah.
For the people to look out for.
Yeah, and it's in English. That's very interesting. Yeah. I am going to look out for it here. So anyway, but going back to the text here. The Frierdiker Rebbe is sharing with us, this is important, very important as well, that the animation of what we call the kochos, the powers of the soul, is much deeper than the chushim, than the senses. Let's continue the next paragraph. Even though from the perspective of energy, of vitality, of animation, the senses are less than the vitality in the limbs. And surely, if you compare it to the vitality of the powers, we find there is an advantage to the senses, even over intellect and emotions. And what is that? This is what I was darshaning about earlier. Regarding the matter of pleasure, the pleasure that we find in the senses is a wondrous pleasure. There's no comparison to that pleasure whatsoever. Not only in the vitality of the limbs, in other words, whatever pleasure you got in your lungs and in your heart, it pales in comparison to the pleasure you have in your eyes and in your hearing and your senses. Even in the highest type of koiches, it says, for example, but the pleasure that you have in seeing, it's wondrous. The kasher adam broyer tzir No, when someone sees a beautiful painting, etc., or something very pretty, he's very impacted, very deep inside, and he has pleasure. To the point where his mind and his heart are all subservient, and they melt away for the pleasure that he derives from seeing the painting or the situation. Like I told you before, with Aristotle, that's in the negative, that he had pleasure from whatever he saw, so therefore his bright intellect went out the window. That's in the negative, so too in the positive. Is even more so. He can't move away, like I told you the story when Reb Mendel Futas was looking at the painting in my house of the 10 Hasidim in the wagon from Kaslajev to Lubavitch, and he was like glued. He couldn't leave. And I'm sure Moshe relates to that. Kann sich von dem nicht abreißen. Those are beautiful Yiddish words, which means he kann sich, he cannot, from them, from it, from the painting, from the tzir, from what he sees, nicht abreißen. He cannot separate himself. Honey, supper is ready. Get over here. No response. Where are you? What's going on? It's getting cold. No response. You're not there. The picture has swallowed you. Well, Yonason, give me 2 minutes, please. And so powerful is his appreciation of his eye, looking at this painting, to the point that even when he does leave the place that he's at, looking at the picture, the painting or the sweet thing that he sees becomes engraved in his mind. Fantasies. This is the whole idea of fantasies. I'm sure he'll elaborate on it at another time. The whole idea of imagination and fantasy is this concept, where you become so one with whatever you see and whatever, etc., that you start fantasizing as though it's real. And it can be totally bubba mices. But that's the power of Riyah. That's the power of pleasure coming from Riyah. The Gamba Mokim Shehu, says the Rebbe, he now left Moshe's studio. He's walking down Dolev, or wherever he's walking. He comes home. He feels in his house at the supper table, I'm still in Moshe's studio looking at the painting. Because the painting grabbed me so much that the painting now is making me walk down the street, sit at the table, and that's why sometimes the person sitting and you're like, hello, he's elsewhere. Because he became, it's nechkak b'mochai, it's engraved in his mind. Now he says, not only when he walked away from what he saw, years later, he reminds himself about that experience. It's like he saw it yesterday. Like I just told you before. Look here, in 1975, I went to a concert, and it's still engraved. I remember what I said to my father walking out of the concert. There's certain things that become, that if you have pleasure and delight in that, whatever it is, it becomes part of you, and years later, it's as though it's happening now. Says the Rebbe Yonis, and this all because the great pleasure there is in the sense of seeing, which is much more than the pleasure that we have when we understand something. When you understand and comprehend something, you have pleasure. Your shine, your face is illuminated when you understand something. Because of the pleasure you have in understanding, it's no comparison to the pleasure that you have when you see something. That's the point he's making in this paragraph until now. that the pleasure of Riyah is much more powerful. And Cheved, if you think about this, it's 100% true. Yes, Yonason, what do you want to say?
Yeah, and down below, he uses the Hebrew word, hypnotic, able to disconnect from you.
Okay, I said remove, and you have a good word. Yes, disconnect. Very good.
So it's like when you're connected to the telephone, you're connected to the internet, and you don't want to be disconnected because that's where your energy, that's where your highest comes from. So you feel connected. You don't want to be disconnected.
Okay. I
remember when I was in 770 by the vibrating, and the vibrating would end, and everybody was sitting around trying to make it go on because we didn't want to be disconnected from it.
I relate to that. I relate very much. I remember when the Rebbe would walk out after he made the bracha achreina and he'd walk back to his office. We would sit around the 770, the Bocher, and most of the Balabatim, and we just took out a bottle of wine and we sang L'chaim and we're just schmoozing and talking. It's like I told you, one Pesach, Achar Shel Pesach, my father drove us back 1-2 in the morning after the Farbrengen, and we stopped on 15th Avenue, Borough Park at Korn's Bakery to get the first hot loaf of bread, right? And I remember him saying to us, we were young children, he said to us, I just came out of Gan Eden. And in Gan Eden, I didn't want a wife, I didn't want money, I didn't want children, I just wanted to be in Gan Eden because it's so geschmack. Chevra, it's great to bring together and learn together, but I think that this concept is a very... Avram, you've been too quiet today. Avram, you have nothing to say?
Yes, I think it's a very powerful concept that your eyes bring you a lot of pleasure. That's why it's very important. Mom's important to be careful what you look at.
That's the basis of what it says in all the Svarim. That's right. So, but the issue, you're right. But the issue is, so what do you do if you saw something that's not appropriate or it's etched in your mind? You need to really work on yourself. Instead, Chassidus says, whether it's in Siva Sholem, Matanya, all of Chassidus says, rather than emphasize the negative, overwhelm yourself with so much Kedusha and Torah that all of a sudden those things are not important to you, and don't go there, don't look to fix what I saw 15, 20 years ago that was not appropriate and still comes back to haunt me. So give more tzedakah for that. Learn another piece of Gemara. Go to help another Yid cross the street. And as soon as you go into that mode of negativity, you got to cut. You got to stop. Don't, because if you engage in that, it's only going to suck you in. Because it's, again, why? Because the power of pleasure is so powerful that's created by the eyes, it'll overwhelm everything. That's exactly what we're learning here. So the advice is that Chassidus says is to overwhelm yourself with Kedusha. And the Rebbe told this to many, many people and many students who asked him about different sins that they did and they want tshuva and what could they do. And, yes, sometimes the Rebbe did say, fasting half days in the winter, as the Alter Rebbe says, and giving tzedakah and learning this. It's all true, but the mahalach, the overall mahalach was, the overall approach, mahalach means approach, overall approach was asay tov. More asay tov, more good, and I've seen this with balabatim, people who weren't religious and became religious, and people in the religious community, in the frum community. When the word in Yiddish is kochzich. Koch means cooking, but it means if you're immersed. When you're immersed in good things, in holy things, in Torah things, you'll see that all of a sudden you say, wait a minute, is this who I was 10, 15, 20 years ago? I look myself in the mirror. Not only do I look different with my my yarmulke and whatever. It's not who I was. So yes, when I was a young boy in Chaim, Berlin, and in Brooklyn, and this and that, we had one set of experience. Well, when we become someone else, that experience is put to the side. Now, he did say here that a very deep experience that's you have a pleasure in can come back to your mind. So you have to be on guard. You have to be on guard, right? You have to be on guard, and as you say, you have to be on guard, but not to Avram Chassidus, the Baal Shem Tov. That was the accomplishment. Not to dwell in the negative, because if you will lose the battle. It's a guarantee. It's not a question, because it's stronger than us. Okay, so rather than and I there's so much to talk about, but they talk about I don't want to really talk about it online, but the psychologists talk about this issue. If someone does something in a marriage inappropriate, do you forgive them? And it's a very sensitive issue, and trust me, it's in all communities. I mean, I've met people here with Hasidim who specialize in this, counseling and dealing with couples. This is, I'm sure Hillel is aware of this. Everyone's aware, but what would be, if you had a title of a talk, what is the view of Hasidus on someone who had an affair? What would Hasidus say about that? What would the Baal Shem Tov say about that? I mean, and I think that this idea also would be part of an answer. I'm not saying the entire answer. Do you forgive? Do you see that as a part of a wholesome continuation of a marriage and a family? And why? And why? This whole idea is if you're really working to transfer your tainug, your pleasure from one issue to another issue, that's healthy. That's healthy. Fact that we goofed up, okay, we're humans. That's the way it is, Ask Hashem why you created us with a Yetzer Hara. Why you created us with it's a pasuk in Chumash. Yetzer Leva Adam, Ram and Urav. So the Christians, Lahavdil, they say that means, the first sin and all that narishkeit. We don't believe that. But the fact is, we do have a tendency for nonsense. So that's the issue. That's the issue. That although I have that tendency, I break it by immersing myself in good things. We'll continue Mitzvah tomorrow. Zai gesund, have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.